Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Let's start a Mara event with the traditional prayer and then the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all stand. Heavenly Father, bless us for having the foresight and the insight to be here today. Bless us for the resources that we bring to the table in order to effect positive and lasting change. In your name, we do all of these things. Amen.
Amen.
Now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, born and unborn.
Thank you so much. It's a good thing to see so many people here this afternoon. Many of you I've met. For those that I haven't met, my name is Rachel Kemp, and I am the state committee woman for the 2nd Suffolk District. And people say, well, okay, where is that? Brad, what's the answer to 2nd Suffolk?
The heart of Boston, and it's usually the mighty 2nd Suffolk.
Oh, that's right. I usually use the mighty 2nd Suffolk. So it's really, but before I do the introduction, many of you are Mara members. However, we do have members of the executive team from the Boston Republican City Committee here, Brad Williams and Katie Regan. And we also have Boston Ward chairs. Ward 11,
Edward Wagner.
Ward 13, Ward 21, newly organized. So it is very, very appropriate that we are here in historic Roxbury today. This location is really a nexus, because if you were to look 3 blocks away, you'd see the home of William Lloyd Garrison. If you were to walk 2 blocks past the mosque, you would actually see the field where one of the more storied cavalry brigades in the Civil War actually practiced before going off to war. And 2 blocks that way is the Dillway Thomas House. And that is where George Washington and the Patriots strategized and executed for liberty. And here we are again in historic Roxbury, planting the seeds to talk about liberty and equality for all. I'm not going to go on for a very long time because we are behind schedule a bit, but I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon, Mr. K. Carl Smith. Mr. Smith has had a storied history of his own. He's a retired major in the Army, U.S. Army, and he's an entrepreneur who I'm told has the Midas touch. And now he is the founder of the Frederick Douglass movement. And he will be telling you today just what it means to be a Frederick Douglass Republican. And the insights that you will walk away with will be surprising. Mr. K. Carl Smith.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? I'm going to have to use a microphone. I don't have that command voice like Rachel has. That opera singing voice. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. I want to thank you for inviting me to come to Boston. Growing up, we always referred to Boston as the cold country. I left Alabama at 19 degrees. I got here at 16 degrees, so I just went to So I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for the hospitality of both Carl and Rachel, who went out to eat dinner last night, so I had a chance to talk to them. We had a chance to break bread, so I really appreciate their hospitality. Appreciate them very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, driving great distances. Some of you drove an hour away, some of you from another state, Rhode Island, and that you come here to hear a message of liberty, hear a message of how we can save our nation, how we can preserve the blessings of liberty for our posterity, how we can defend the Constitution and defend our God-given right to free will. So I'm so happy to be in Boston, but also be in this location, because before I get here, I'm gonna make my way. I don't know how to do it. I'm gonna go find Garrison's old home, because there's always been, Douglas and Garrison had a relationship. So I'm gonna do my best to just to peek around the corner and see what's going on around in the Rochester area, Roxbury area. All right, I got all the protocol out of the way. Let's get down to business. Let's talk about liberty. Before I even talk to you about the Frederick Douglass Republican, can you hear me? If I stand straight up, I feel like I have to lean.
Yeah.
Before I even talk about this whole Frederick Douglass Republican methodology, this movement, let me quickly dispel some myths that exist about this methodology. And I gotta cover, because when I cover these, when I dispel these 3 or 4 myths, it's gonna give you a better appreciation what I'm gonna say later. Myth number one. Myth number one. The myth is the Frederick Douglass Republican movement is a black membership organization. That is not true. That is not true. To become a Frederick Douglass Republican is not based on your ethnicity or your skin color. It's based on your belief in embracing the 4 life-empowering values of Frederick Douglass. Respect for the U.S. Constitution is one. I'm gonna come on that side. I'm a former motivational speaker, so I don't like to stand behind podiums. Respect for the U.S. Constitution is number 1. Respect for life is number 2. Number 3, the belief in limited government. In other words, I like to keep more of the money that I make. And 4, the belief in personal responsibility. That's a biblical principle. It comes out of Thessalonians. If a man doesn't work, he should not eat. So if you embrace those 4 life-empowering values, we call them life-empowering values. That's what they are. Well, then that's what makes you a Frederick Douglass Republican. This is not a black membership organization. There's about 60,000 people right now who've been trained in this methodology, and they refer to themselves as a Frederick Douglass Republican. 60%, almost 60% of them are white. 60%. Most of them are Tea Party activists. Most of them are Tea Party activists because they believe what Douglass believed in, respect for the U.S. Constitution, and so on. And it's not surprising that most of them are white, because when I first started, I took this message to conservatives. Most conservatives are white. We're going to catch up. Blacks, we're going to catch up. I just have not taken it to them yet. Okay? Because black Americans are really conservative at heart. Now, like in my case, I was not converted to conservatism. I've always been one, I just didn't know it. I grew up in a Christian household. So myth number 1, this is not a black membership organization. That's myth number 1. It's all inclusive, not exclusive. Myth number 2 is this, that the Frederick Douglass Republican methodology, and I'm going to share with you, that this is a methodology on how to share conservatism with black folks. No. This is not a methodology on how to share conservatism with black folks. This is a methodology on how to share the life-empowering values of the conservative philosophy with all Americans. Blacks, Latinos, women, young people. We're all want liberty. We're all want a God-given right for self-rule. We all want a God-given right for free will. So the training that I give, the Frederick Douglass Republican 101 training, it is not diversity training. It is liberty training Frederick Douglass style. Okay? Myth number 3. Myth number 3 is that a white conservative cannot engage somebody of a different ethnicity. In other words, most people think that you gotta have a black person and go talk to a black person about conservatism in order for them to get it. Or a Latino, talk Latino. Most white conservatives believe that, oh, blacks not gonna talk, they're not gonna listen to me. Stop believing that lie. Stop believing that lie. It's not true. I know some black conservatives who cannot engage black folks. I used to be one of them before God gave me this Frederick Douglass piece. So stop believing that lie. And I put it to you this way, to prove to you that you don't have to be of a person ethnicity in order to engage you. You just have to use something that works. Who established a diversity outreach program? Who established a diversity outreach program that is still having a major impact in the world today? Jesus. It was Jehovah God, you're right. When he commissioned Paul to take the gospel to the Gentiles. Wait a minute, Paul was a Jew by ethnicity. He was commissioned to take the gospel to people of different ethnicities, different races. The Gentiles. Paul had to be trained. He was under the tutelage of Gamaliel. Conservatives have to be trained. I didn't get this. I had to be trained. I didn't get this thing right at first. You know, it's not easy being a black conservative.
We know that.
And family reunions were tough. Thanksgivings were tough. Sitting at the tiny table all the time was tough. Because I had these, I was different from everybody else in terms of my values. I'll talk about that in a minute. It's my testimony. So those are 3 myths. This is not a black membership organization. This is not a message how to share conservative with black folks. No. Stop believing the lies. You can't do it. You can't do it. You have to be trained how to do it. And the other myth is this. With the Frederick Douglass Republican movement, we're not recruiting anyone to become Republicans. The Republican Party today does not resemble the party of Douglass. Does not. So with the Frederick Douglass Republican movement, one of our primary objectives is this, is to help today's Republican Party get back to where it was in time of Douglass in terms of big capital and spiritual distinction. Now, I may add this to that as well. We also advocate it really doesn't matter which party a person's in. If a person wants to be a Democrat, fine. Or Republican, fine. What I've learned, what matters most is this. The way in which you vote, does it show your love and your faithfulness to the God that you say you serve? Are you voting your values? That's what matters. Are you voting your values? But to be a Republican or a Democrat, that's your own personal choice. I have my reasons. And I'll share it with you later. So, because why? We need people in both political parties with a Frederick Douglass perspective. Yes. Meaning that defending the Constitution. Meaning that making the life of the poor and the working poor a legislative priority. Not in terms of entitlements for a lifetime, but to elevate the poor to become employees and entrepreneurs. Give them opportunity. That's what it's all about. Because once we elevate the least of these, everybody else is elevated. Let me tell you what's going on. This whole thing about President Obama trying to get this unemployment extension, and the Republicans are fighting it. Republicans are blowing it. Because what's happening is, the perception is they don't care about the poor. Here's what they should do. Go to the president and say, look, we want to do this extension thing too, but let's, as part of this bill, whatever, let's cut corporate income tax to create an atmosphere for employment. Let them know, let Americans know the reason why we got to extend unemployment benefits because the administration has anti-small business policies. Let's cut some corporate taxes. Let's approve the Keystone Pipeline. You know, let's create some jobs. But what's happening, they're being outplayed. The Republicans, they don't get it. So now they come across, they don't care about the poor, and some of them don't care about the poor. That's why we got the Republican Party recapture its political distinction. They got to negotiate that thing. Okay, Mr. President, you want to extend unemployment benefits? It is necessary to do that because there aren't any jobs out there, part-time jobs. But Mr. President, let's go ahead and add something to this bill. Let's cut corporate income tax so these companies now can put more money back into research and create opportunity for more jobs. That kind of thing. We'll see what's going to happen with that. That's my 2 cents on it. So, a little bit about me, a little bit more about me. I'm a former U.S. Army officer. I served 17 years of active duty. I don't like to use the word retirement, but I completed my service obligation back in 1996. See, the word retirement is not even in the Bible, so I'm not going to use the word retirement. Did that, 1996, left the active duty, started an engineering firm during the dot-com era. Started writing on the wall and left that. Became a motivational speaker. And then God dried that up and told me now I'm a full-time professional political agitator. It doesn't matter if you have an R behind your name, a D behind your name, or an I. It doesn't matter. If you're not adhering to the Constitution, if you're not making the plight of the poor a legislative priority, not in terms of entitlements, but opportunity for the poor to help end generational poverty and to elevate the poor to become employees and entrepreneurs. That's the method of Douglass. So those are the myths. K. Carl Smith, the founder and president of Frederick Douglass Republican. I was raised in a Christian Democrat household. I always say that I was born black. I know I was born black. I thought I was born a Democrat. And two things changed my life. The Word of God changed my life. The words of Frederick Douglass changed my political thinking. In terms of changing my life, if you read 2 Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 13:5, in the Message translation, it says, examine yourself. I'm looking for my water. What did I do? Excuse me. I had my water. Put it down somewhere.
Get you another one.
I have it. All right. If you read 2 Corinthians 13:5 in the Message translation, this happened to me about 17 years ago, 18 years ago now. I read that scripture so many times before, but one night I read it. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says this, examine yourself to make sure you're solid in the faith. Don't go along taking things for granted. You need first-hand evidence, not mere hearsay, that Jesus Christ is in you. If you fail the test, do something about it. Well, 18, 19 years ago, I started examining myself. I started examining the way I was voting. And the way I was voting was opposite of my worship. I don't believe in same-sex marriage, and if somebody wants to live that lifestyle, that's them, but I was voting that way. I didn't think about it. I just did it. And so God diagnosed me and told me that I was a political schizophrenic. A political schizophrenic is a person who worships one way and votes in another. I was crazy. So that put me in check. Where I start voting my values, not voting party. There's a quote from Robert Brown Elliott. During Reconstruction, Robert Brown Elliott was one of the first black congressmen to serve the U.S. Congress out of South Carolina. One of the first of the 7 first blacks, Republicans. And he has a quote that really sums this up. He says, I am a slave to principles. I call no political party master. That's what it's all about. Douglass changed my political thinking. Now, I grew up in a Democrat household. All right, keep that in mind. Somebody sent me a quote from Douglass one time, and Douglass said, I am a black, dyed-in-the-wool Republican. When I read it, I said, wait a minute, Douglass was a Tom? Douglass was an Uncle Tom? He was an Uncle Tom. I said, I don't believe this. And the quote goes on to say, and I never intend to belong to any other party than the party of freedom and progress. I said, wait a minute. Why did Douglass say freedom and progress Republican Party? And he did not say freedom and progress Democrat Party. He has turned my world upside down. Because I when I told those things. I thought George Wallace was a Democrat, a Republican. I grew up thinking that Will Connor, the one in Birmingham who turned on the high-pressure water hose and put the K-9 dogs on the civil rights protesters in Birmingham, the black and white film you used to see back in the 1960s, I thought Will Connor was a Republican. I thought the Ku Klux Klan was started by the Republican Party. I thought the people who bombed 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama were done by Republicans. When I started reading Douglass, his autobiographies and his writings, and all his writings, and started reading some other things in history, Douglass helped turn my political world right side up. I became more of a critical thinker, not taking for granted what people had to say and start checking it out on my own. So that's me. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. That's how I identify myself politically. I am a conservative, but I'm a Frederick Douglass type conservative, not a George Wallace type conservative. You follow me? And I started referring to myself as a Frederick Douglass Republican several years ago. Did not know I was growing a movement by doing that. I had no idea I was growing a movement. And I mentioned before that to become a Frederick Douglass Republican is not based on your ethnicity or your skin color, it's based on your embracing those 4 values of Douglass. Okay? Those 4 values of Douglass. Let me quickly give you a 3-minute class on Douglass, because most folks don't know the substance of Douglass. Most folks do not know the substance of Douglass, that I want to get into the Frederick Douglass Republican philosophy and the methodology of how to engage, how we can save this nation, and advance the cause of conservatism in the nation. Frederick Douglass, born 1818 in Maryland, some say 1817. Frederick Douglass was born below poverty. He was born below poverty. And see, Dr. Ben Carson, he was born into poverty in Detroit. But when you're born into slavery, you're born below poverty because you don't even own your own body. As I can recall, he never owned a pair of shoes until he was 8 years old, never slept in a bed till the age of 10. Frederick Douglass was homeschooled, self-taught. He started his own homeschooling program on the plantation. And he realized at a very young age that his key to freedom was to learn how to read and write. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. The slave master took care of him, provided clothing. The slave master provided Douglass with shelter, food, and health care. I remember reading Douglass. Douglass said on a plantation when a slave was hurt or sick, it could have been a broken arm or upset stomach, the medical treatment was Epsom salt. Now, the master exempted himself from that type of medical treatment. If the master got sick, he received proper medical treatment from a proper authority or expert. Sound familiar?
Yes.
The elites in both parties exempt themselves from the health care they're imposing upon us.
Right.
Both parties.
Yep.
That's a problem. See, slavery by government is still slavery. And the techniques of oppression, I learned by reading Douglass, the techniques of oppression used by the slave master on the slave are identical to the techniques of oppression used by the slave government on us. So Douglass was getting this free stuff while he was a slave. If Governor Rumby was here, he might not be far away. I am in Massachusetts, right? I guess if Governor Romney was here, he would say that Douglass was a 47%, getting that free stuff. But the story doesn't end there. Douglass escaped from slavery in 1838. He escaped from slavery. He escaped from slave master entitlements. He escaped from it. Now, while he was on the system, he used it to jumpstart his life. He learned how to read and write. He maximized education opportunities while on the system. See, there's nothing really wrong with entitlements if you use it to jumpstart your life, but don't make it a permanent fixture in your life. That's why we got to elevate the poor. How do you elevate someone that's a 47%? Well, first of all, many 47%ers inspire to be more than that. You just got to give them the opportunity. And the rest of them, you have to show them that they're being enslaved. Harriet Tubman said on one occasion, I freed 1,000 slaves. I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed more only if they knew they were slaves. We had to show people they're being enslaved. Most folks don't understand socialism and Marxism. You have to give them a slavery metaphor. And when you give them a slavery metaphor, you got to bring in Douglass, because Douglass was a slave. He escaped from slavery in 1838, met up with William Lloyd Garrison. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents: Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. 5. That's not bad for a guy with 0 days of formal schooling. He wrote 3 autobiographies. Frederick Douglass wrote 3 autobiographies. The first one is entitled The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. The second one is entitled By Bondage, By Freedom. And the third one is entitled The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. He wrote 3 autobiographies. I'm giving some tidbits on Douglass most folks don't know. Douglass spelled his last name with 2 S's. That's a common mistake. 2 S's on Douglass's last name. Frederick Douglass was a capitalist. He was a free market entrepreneur. He discovered his God-given gifts and his God-given talents, and he took his obsession and he made it a profession. He was a lecturer. He was a writer. Those were his gifts. Trivia question. Douglass passed away in 1895 as a result of a heart attack at the age of 77. How much money in savings do you think Douglass had amassed at the time of his death? Put your hand down. We had dinner last night. We talked about it. How much money in savings? Don't give the inflated dollars. How much money did this man who was a slave for 20 years, now he worked for 20 years, didn't get paid. How much money in savings do you think he had amassed at the time of his death? 1895. $400,000. $400,000. Going once, going twice, about 300,000. Going once, going twice. $350 million. $300,000. $300,000. $300,000 back then is more than $10 million today.
Wow.
Douglass was a 47%. He died a 1%. Okay? So we should not envy wealth creation. We should emulate it, because that's how jobs are created. Wealth creation and job creation go hand in hand. I learned it by studying Douglass. Douglass did not believe in wealth redistribution. He believed, obviously, in wealth creation. That Douglass is a bad boy. Turn my life right side up. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're serious about defending liberty, if we are serious about defending the Constitution, if we are serious about preserving the blessings of liberty for our posterity, we must make Frederick Douglass an integral part of our message. If not, we're doomed for failure. You can't win without Douglass. When you say that you're a Frederick Douglass Republican, and you hold Douglass in high esteem, and you know a few things about Douglass you can relate, nobody can call you a racist. You believe what Douglass believed in, who was a victim of racism. You can't call a Frederick Douglass Republican Uncle Tom or a sellout. Douglass was not Uncle Tom or a sellout. While he was on the plantation as a 16-year-old boy, a teenager, once Douglass learned how to read and write, he started a tutorial program on the plantation to teach other slaves how to read and write, to prepare them for liberty. The political insight. I gotta make this right. So when I say this, ladies and gentlemen, don't leave when I say this. I am gonna come back and explain it, but it's gonna rock your world for a few seconds. The political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. Okay, Carl, that's blasphemy. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. I'm going to say it again so you think I said something differently. The political insight of Frederick Douglass, it is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. Here's why I make this statement. The founding fathers gave us two magnificent documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. You agree? Check. Some of the founding fathers owned slaves. Agree? Yes. When the Constitution was ratified, that is not when they freed their slaves. Check? Some of them, many of them, waited till after they died and their slaves were freed. Check? Therefore, then, their view of liberty is somewhat tainted. Correct? And the left plays on that. The founding fathers owned slaves, so they had to give us a slavery document. Right? They play on that. Here comes Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass did not own any slaves, did he? He was a slave. But in his writings and his speeches, he affirms both the founding fathers and the Constitution. Douglass said on one occasion, now back up here. At first, Douglass took for granted and face value what William Lloyd Garrison was telling him. Because remember now, the Garrisonians believed the founding fathers gave us slavery in the Constitution. Douglass believed that himself at one time. But Douglass did something very interesting. What did he do? He went back and read the Constitution. Then he read the founding fathers' convention notes. And Douglass said, wait a minute. Douglass said, the Constitution reads, we the people. It does not read, we the white people. If black folks are people, then, that Douglass concluded, if black folks are people, they are to be included as benefactors of this Constitution. Douglass closed that thing out by saying, the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem is in the application of the Constitution. The problem is not with the Bible. The problem is in the application of the Bible. Douglass wrapped that thing up. Thank God we have a literary legacy of the writings of Douglass to refute the lies and propaganda of the left. Thank God we got Douglass. The trumps all that. And here's the thing I got to share with you. And I did this on the show last week. Somebody called in, I think it was a Marxist called in. He had to be. And he asked me about the father, this paradox between the father and fathers being owners of slaves, but yet writing this document saying we the people. And obviously, since they owned slaves, they didn't mean black folks. And that's not what Douglass said. Now, here's why Douglass is so important. Douglass gives us his view from a slave's perspective. Here's what I want to share with this. I've come to understand with the founding fathers that God uses imperfect people to write noble documents. God used Moses to write the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Moses was a murderer, but yet God inspired him to write the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It doesn't stop there. King David, he was imperfect. He had his issue with Bathsheba, but yet God inspired him to write the book of Psalms. The Apostle Paul, he was not perfect. He persecuted some folks, but yet God inspired him to write the majority of the New Testament. The founding fathers, they were not perfect, but yet they wrote a document that says on the face of it, we the people, not we the white people. If the founding fathers were really racist and considering blacks to have, in my view, considering blacks to have a lot of political power back then, because they were on plantation, nothing would have stopped them to say, we the white people got away with it. But that's not what they did. It was God inspired. God uses imperfect people to write noble documents.
Hallelujah. Praise God.
That's what he does. So the left plays on that. But we got Douglass now. We got Douglass to refute the lies and propaganda of the left. That's why I say, and I contend this, we will not be successful in defending liberty, defending the Constitution without Douglass. You can't do it without Douglass. I can't think of any American icon that you can use, a patriotic icon that brings to the table what Douglass brings to the table. You can't use Reagan. Reagan wasn't a slave. You can't use Abraham Lincoln if it wasn't for Douglass. Sojourner Truth, Wendell Phillips, the Charles Sumner that agitated Lincoln, Lincoln improved as a leader and a statesman. Remember, he supported slavery in the South during his first inaugural address. Douglass. Frederick Douglass is the grandfather of the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King is the father of the Civil Rights Movement. It goes back to Douglass. Why do you think you've never seen a movie on Douglass? They never done a movie on Frederick Douglass. Why? He refutes the agenda of the socialists in Hollywood. That's why. All right. We got that. Now let me get into this whole Frederick Douglass Republican methodology and talk about some things that's more detailed in my book. What this methodology is, why it works. Frederick Douglass Republican. Now I did not come up with this. This was given to me. I mentioned last night at dinner, I feel like I won the lottery because out of 3 million people in the United States, God gave me this message to share. And I thank God every day for allowing me to do something great for him. I'm thankful for that. So I won the lottery. Now, here's how this thing works. It's so powerful. It's so simple. It's so simple to understand. It's been there for years. But God allowed me to connect the dots. Frederick Douglass Republican, that phrase, that is an oxymoron. Frederick Douglass, an icon of liberty, because we're losing a propaganda battle, Republican, an icon of racism. Frederick Douglass Republican, those two just don't go together. They just don't go together. When someone says that they are a Frederick Douglass Republican, what you're saying is that I hold this man in high esteem. Now, of course, I'm not putting him before God. I'm just elevating his legacy because God gave us Douglass. Follow? I had to mention that statement because somebody tried to put me in check on that. Why are you talking about Douglass all the time? Because God gave you Douglass. And God gave us Douglass for this time in history to save this country. Douglass helped Lincoln to save the country several years ago. Because Lincoln said on one occasion, the United States, because of the Civil War, is a house divided. And he brought Douglass in as an advisor. Okay? Frederick Douglass Republican is oxymoron. That's what I call myself politically. Meaning that my values are a lockstep with Douglass. Because it's an oxymoron, and most folks don't, the thing I just shared with you about Douglass, most folks don't know that. Look, that's those things. Most folks don't know the substance of Douglass. But if you carefully study and show yourself approved, you're going to know more about Douglass than 90% of the people in this country. And when you're in a conversation with someone, you're driving the narrative. You're framing the debate. You become the person in the conversation, become the inspiration. And the person that's a Frederick Douglass Republican, you can't call them a racist. But you have to carefully study and show yourself approved. You just can't be an empty suitor and say I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. No, you got to carefully study to show yourself approved. Because the only attack that the left has against this whole methodology, or you just using Douglass to get black votes, or you just using no. You have to carefully study and show yourself approved. They're going to say that anyway. But you cannot let anybody separate you from your testimony. They don't know how the God you serve inspired you, touches your heart every day to give you knowledge and deliverance of information. There's a reason why you're here. There's something that inspired you to come here. So the things I'm going to share with you is going to be life-changing in your mind. Because you're going to know how to talk to your friends, your fellow citizens, and your family members about your conservative values without the fear of them calling you a racist or a sellout. You're going to make Thanksgiving time and family reunion time in your family a little bit different now. You're going to be cutting the turkey. Because you know how to engage. The way we're going to save this nation, we got to learn how to engage. Karl Rove has it all wrong. The RNC has it all wrong. Karl Rove wants to spend money and all this and just send all this stuff across the airwaves. You don't change hearts and minds that way. The way you change hearts and minds, you got to engage. And so what has to happen, you got to know within your circle of influence, your friends, your family members, your fellow citizens, you got to know how to talk to them. And you got to be willing to talk to people who may not look like you. Some of the most conservative folks you ever met in your life are Latinos and Black Americans. You gotta talk to them. You gotta know how to do it, what to say, what words you should not use until you define it first. Because their definition of some things may not be what you think it is, or what they are. Why does the word conservative has a negative connotation? What happened? Why does the word conservative and Republican have a negative connotation, and in most cases means racist? What happened? 1956, Republican presidential candidate Eisenhower got 40% of the black vote in 1956. Eisenhower got 40%. 4 years later, Nixon ran for the presidency. Nixon got 32% of the black vote. 32%. 4 years later, Goldwater got 6% of the black vote. What happened between 1960 and 64? Here's what happened. And this is the 600-pound elephant that's in the room that nobody wants to talk about. 1964. 1964. When LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act into law in 64, 18 senators voted against it. 17 were your racist Democrat, okay? And you had one Republican who voted against it. Who was that? Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater himself was not a racist. Matter of fact, Goldwater was an integrationist. And Goldwater was from Arizona. At the age of 37, I believe, he inherited his family's retail business. Goldwater was one of the first businesses in Arizona that hired black cashiers. And Goldwater went around encouraging other business owners to do likewise. The reason why Goldwater voted against the civil rights legislation of 64, not because he was a racist, but he did it based on constitutional grounds. He sought the opinion of a Yale University professor, law professor at that time, guy by the name of Robert Bork. Robert Bork wrote a 75-page opinion, gave it to Goldwater to help him make his decision. And in that opinion, what came out of it, Goldwater opposed the 1964 Civil Rights Act that was signed now. He opposed it based on Title II, Title VII, that dealt with accommodation and employment. Goldwater was against it for constitutional reasons. To add insult to injury, we're still in 64. To add insult to injury, the Republican Party had their national convention at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. The Republican National Convention, Cow Palace, San Francisco. Who did the Republican Party nominate as a presidential candidate in 64 running against LBJ? Goldwater. Goldwater's nickname was Mr. Conservative, correct? Goldwater wrote a book entitled The Consciousness of a Conservative. Connect the dots now. Goldwater voted against the bill. When Goldwater won that nomination in 64, the same day he received the nomination, Dr. King issued a press release. A copy of it with me. I have a digital image of that press release. Dr. King issued a press release. What happened then, the party of emancipation, the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, nominated as a presidential candidate the guy who voted against civil rights. Black folks felt alienated.
What about the other 17?
Well, the other 17 ran for the presidency. You're right. What about the other 17 who were Democrats? They were not nominated to become the president of the United States. You follow me? Goldwater was the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. Okay? So Dr. King responded because here's the next leader, the next wannabe leader of the United States running for the presidency. Dr. King issued a press release. Let me pull it up right quick. I'm not going to read the entire press release to you, but I'm going to pull out some things that's in it to give you a sense of what was going on and what Dr. King's concern was. Press release, okay? Let me get behind the podium for you to see. This is the press release here, dated July 16, 1964. Subject, statement from Dr. Martin Luther King on the Republican nomination of Senator Barry Goldwater. Here's the first sentence. It is both unfortunate and disastrous that the Republican Party has nominated Senator Barry Goldwater as its candidate for the presidency of the United States. Let's go down further. It says, on the urgent issue of civil rights, Senator Goldwater represents a philosophy that is morally indefensible and politically and socially suicidal. While not himself a racist, Mr. Goldwater articulates a philosophy which gives aid and comfort to the racists. His candidacy and philosophy will serve as an umbrella under which extremists of all stripes will stand. In light of these facts, and because of my love for America, I have no alternative but to urge every Negro and every white person of goodwill to vote against Goldwater and to withdraw support from any Republican candidate that does not politically disassociate himself from Senator Barry Goldwater and his philosophy. Here's Dr. King's concern, and I understand it. Dr. King said, look, Barry Goldwater wanted to be so politically correct that he was morally wrong. Goldwater wanted to be so politically correct that he was morally wrong, meaning that states' rights, let them figure it out. Let blacks in the South, let their future be left in the hands of the racist leaders in politics. Let them figure it out. Dr. King said, no way. No way. That's a moral position where he was wrong. And before he died, of course, Goldwater said he regretted how he had voted, and that was a mistake. Goldwater would be so constitutionally right that he was morally wrong. And how can you be constitutionally right when someone's constitutional rights are being violated? That's when blacks left the Democrat Party en masse. 6% Goldwater received. Go back and read what happened at the Cow Palace. Read about how the black delegates were treated at the Republican National Convention at the Cow Palace. They were spat on because they were not Goldwater supporters, they were Rockefeller supporters. The numbers were diminished. I think they had, if I can recall, leading up to the convention, about 200 delegates, black delegates. It was reduced down to 13 at the state level. One black delegate for every 100 white delegates. So this is what happened. Jackie Robinson was on the floor at that convention at the time. Blacks were being spat on, called outside their name. One man's suit was set on fire with him in it. This is 600-pound elephant nobody wants to talk about. So blacks did not become Democrats because of entitlements. Blacks became Democrats because they were sold out by the Democrat Party and Goldwater conservatives. Not all Goldwater conservatives, some Goldwater conservatives disagreed with Goldwater. His press secretary disagreed with him. Jackie Robinson was on the floor at the convention. He was quoted of saying, "Now I see what it's like to be a Jew in Hitler's army." And Goldwater left the Republican Party, became a Democrat. Not Goldwater, Jackie Robinson did. Left the Republican Party, became a Democrat. Think about this. Here's the irony of all this. It's the Democrat Party that gave us slavery. The Democrat Party gave us Jim Crow. It was the Democrat Party that gave us segregation. So blacks felt alienated by the Republican Party. They became politically homeless and went to the party of their oppression. That's why the word conservative has a negative tinge. I was not even 10 years old at that time. When I heard Goldwater's name mentioned by my parents, the word racist and conservative was used in the same sentence. So when you're out here engaging, you got to let people know that you're not a bull-colored conservative. You're not trying to hold on to the racist doctrine of those racist fathers. You're trying to hold on to the philosophy of the founding fathers. See, the racist fathers gave us Jim Crow. The founding fathers gave us the Constitution. That's why when you say you're a black conservative, white conservative, people look at you like you got four heads. How do you turn that around? Wrote a book, many of you you bought the book, thank you for your support. The book is entitled Frederick Douglass Republican, The Movement to Reignite America's Passion for Liberty. This is an action handbook for conservatives. It's not a dissertation on the political views of Douglass, it's an action handbook for us. Give us information on things we need to know so we can engage. For example, those 4 life empowering values that I referred to you, I give you 5 quotes. What did Douglass say about the Constitution? What did Douglass say about life? What did Douglass say about limited government? And what did Frederick Douglass say about personal responsibility? Okay? Now, so when you read this book, you're going to know how to engage. You're going to know what to say and how to say it and what not to say. But I found out when people were reading the book, they still were not engaged because they didn't have, even though they had the confidence, they had not honed their skills when it comes to engaging. So I wrote a companion guide to the book, and it's going to be, if you buy a book today, it's going to be put in the mail to you. I wrote a companion guide to the book. It's called The Most Asked Challenges. Here's what's behind this book, this companion guide. When you study the ministry of Christ, you recall sometimes how the scribes and Pharisees would try to trap him, hoping that the Christ would say something damaging so they could discredit him. Well, that's what liberals do to us conservatives. They try to trap us, hoping that we say something damaging so they can call us a racist, so they can call us a sellout. So then when you try to engage down the line, you've already been discredited. So your message falls on deaf ears. I just read a Gallup poll survey, came out, been out about 13 days now. It said that most Americans 38% of Americans identify themselves as conservatives. 28% of them identify themselves as liberals. So this is a center-right nation. Most folks are conservative at heart. The problem we have is not with the message. The problem we have as conservatives is the method that we're using to deliver the message. It's not working. It's falling on deaf ears. So the Pharisees and the scribes always try to trap the Christ, hoping that he would say something damaging so they could discredit him. They could never do it, but they sure enough tried. Now, here's something the scribes and Pharisees did not realize. They didn't realize that, number one, Christ was a subject matter expert. They didn't realize that. And he had the gift of taking their challenges, and he could turn that challenge around. He could make it a teachable moment and inspire many of them to join the ranks of this movement. That's what we must do. We got to take the challenges that you're going to get when you're out here engaging. And you got to be able to take that challenge, you got to turn it around, you got to make it a teachable moment. So in this companion guide, I identified the 12 most asked challenges that we face as conservatives. How you take that challenge, you turn it around, you make it a teachable moment, and this is a center-right nation. Most folks want to join the rank of the movement, because most folks are conservative at heart. Here's an example. You're out here engaging, or you want to engage, and you talk to somebody, man, I look like you, but you want to engage. And they ask you, well, sir or ma'am, are you a conservative? And before you met me, what would you have said? Yes, and you just lost.
That's right.
You just lost. The word conservative, the word Republican, the word Tea Party, and also the word Constitution, because we're losing a propaganda battle, they all mean what? Racist. If you call yourself a black conservative, a Christian conservative, a Reagan conservative, a Tea Party conservative, you might as well drop that last word conservative, call yourself a black racist, Tea Party racist, Christian racist, a Reagan racist. Here's how you turn it around. Okay, Carl, are you a conservative? I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. And I believe in the 4 life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. Respect for the U.S. Constitution, respect for life. I believe in limited government, and I believe in personal responsibility. And sometimes the Christ would ask them a question to that question. And you got to do the same thing. You say, do you share these values of Douglass? Most folks are going to say yes. And you say, guess what? You say, guess what? That makes you a conservative. Better still, that makes you a Frederick Douglass Republican. That's the hook. You got to understand now what I've learned when you can show someone in a non-confrontational and a non-condescending way that how they have been betrayed and lied to, that's when they change how they vote. What most conservatives do, you get upset when some people can't get it, and it becomes a confrontation. You never have a conference, you got a confrontation. And so you say conservative, your message is already on deaf ears. Before you, I don't care what facts you bring up later on, your message is already on deaf ears. The wall is up. Because I heard the word conservative. And I'm talking about how I used to react. Why would I ever want to listen to a conservative that's a racist? In my mind now. Why would I ever want to listen to one? Why would I ever want to listen to a racist? See what I'm saying? Same thing with the word Republican. The Democrat Party has co-opted the history of the Republican Party. Your homework assignment for the night is this. Go into your website, type in DNC in Google, the Democrat National Committee, and the first thing that's going to come up is the Democrat National Committee website. On the home page, there is an About link. When you click that About link, there's a sublink that says History, or it may say Our History. When you go, some of y'all have your smartphones here, you probably can look it up as I'm talking to you. When you go to that history page on the Democrat Party's website, this is the first sentence that you will find. For more than 200 years, we have led the fight with civil rights. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm not paraphrasing. I'm giving it to you verbatim. Comma, women's rights. Comma, workers' rights. I said, workers' rights? I said, hell, slave workers? You didn't support them. Here's what I've learned, and I stand by this. There's no perfect political party. None. Racism has no political place. It does not. But the leadership of the Democrat Party, they are liars. They deceive. They distort. They accuse, and they rewrite history. They rewrite history. That's on their website. 200 years ago was 1814. Slavery was alive and well back then in 1814. The Democrat Party supported slavery in its platform. In its political platform. 1854, Douglass wrote an essay entitled The Slavery Party. Douglass said, because the Democrat Party was against the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And they started the KKK. And did not pass any anti-lynching laws. Douglass said in this essay, he said, the best example of slavery in politics is the Democrat Party.